So quickly though, this is a kind of a shorter version of a much sort of longer talk that kind of generally goes into test-driven database development in its sort of more of its entirety. So TDD in the process, particularly how it kind of applies itself to SQL and database development, continuous integration, and then from there, once you kind of get those practices involved, how you can then use that to refactor schemas and that kind of thing, so that you can almost refactor at the same kind of rate you can code, or at least your sort of back-end code. That's the kind of the aim of things. If you're given the number of people who tend to be kind of involved in SQL, they often kind of wonder why people even still write that stuff. For those of us who kind of, or see, my background is mostly working with big enterprise systems where if you don't have a relational database at the bottom of it, it is not a real enterprise system, and that usually means there's a whole wodge of code, particularly SQL code, with far too much business logic in it. To make any change, you're going to need to kind of write some tests. So anyway, because you're all EE people, you know about refactoring, you know about TDD, you're probably just more interested in seeing kind of how this thing works, and you just want me to show you the money and just go through a quick example and then go, oh yes, it works, or oh no, I'm kind of not interested, I'll stick to NoSQL, it's just too much like hard work. So that's kind of what I go through, is I'll sort of investigate the CI side kind of very briefly, just to show you that it works, and then we'll kind of go through a store procedure, develop it in a test-first manner in a really contrived example for 15 minutes, but hopefully you'll kind of get a flavour of some of the things that you can kind of do in practice. To show you that none of this stuff actually requires any hardware whatsoever, this is a nice 8-year-old Dell laptop, which is running Windows XP, but don't tell anybody, because that's obviously clearly would be embarrassing. I'm running SQL Server 2008 R2, and I'm going to use SQL Server Management Studio to flick between the tests and production code, and there's even a bit of batch file goodness thrown in there to build the database. So this is all kind of like free of this, so there is no tooling in the SQL world, pretty much, for refactoring the stuff, so you kind of have to make it up sort of yourself. There's some test frameworks and stuff, but there's no resharper or that kind of thing to help you along. So let me just start with, obviously, they say that the ability to type is inversely proportional to the number of people in the room, so I think it's going to be fairly dire, but we'll see how we get on with. So this is me. I'm about to start developing a feature, and this is me building my database and installing the UnitTest framework, and that took a few seconds. Even in a database I've worked on, which has hundreds of procedures and views and stuff like that, this might take a minute and a half. Which kind of really, before a feature is not really a lot. If you back up and restore a database, it takes seconds. So getting yourself into a position to even start making changes only takes a few seconds, even if you rebuild the database schema from scratch. Excuse me. So what we're going to do, excuse me. Typing at an angle is quite interesting. I've got to just run in a couple of just to give you a feel for what the sort of the CI side of it would be like. I've got, there's just a sort of a noddy database based on Nick John Skeet's idea of a bug database. And there you go, that's me running my test suite, and you can see that I've got the outcome, passed and failed, test names, which are kind of fairly long and so, and if one fails, you see the fail reason and as a summary. Great for basically scripting and parsing in, tap that in, no problem at all. So that's the sort of, as if what I'd run in the background after each change. And then let me just run in, oops, we get to the main event, so to speak. Okay, so this is me kind of pretending that I'm going to develop this feature, and I've got two source code windows open, one of them which will be where my test code goes, and one in scripts where my production code goes. And effectively what you'll see me do is flicking backwards and forwards continually, edit a little bit of code, run the tests, go backwards and forwards, and kind of develop this feature. Right, so we start with, in my test window, now the way this is set up is to, in the test script, for all the SQL tests. So the idea is you have a fixture, just as you would have in an end unit fixture. And here, this fixture tends to be related to a store procedure or a view, or it could be a table if you've got triggers, heaven forbid, constraints, that kind of thing. But your definition of fixtures, whatever. And at the end of the set of tests, we kind of run this test runner, and it will basically look in the database, find tests, and run them. It's just the same as doing reflection in end unit or whatever. So that's me kind of running my tests. So down the bottom here, we'll see my tests appear and my little summary that we saw on the CI thing. Now, the problems start with databases when you deal with the fact that they tend to be kind of like stateful. And there's a lot of kind of ceremony involved in creating procedures where you have to do if create this and drop that and stuff. So got like a little helper here that basically blasts the entire schema away so that you can write things in a little bit more kind of fluid way. It also deletes any temporary tables and that kind of stuff. Kind of helps, you know, with dealing with the fact that there is a stateful element to databases. So that first bit is a bit of a bodge really to get around the six things. Once those two things in place, so we're ready to go with our first test, so I've got this bug database and I'm going to create a little report that says how many bugs are assigned to a user. Fairly kind of simple thing. So, oops. Now, test report returns developers full name as go. Okay, so this is going to be my first test here. This is supposed to look like an attribute, like you'd have an end unit and a fixture name, because there's no classes, so we kind of have to mung around. But hopefully the tail name. And in here, we see the test name is returns developer's full name. Should be reasonably clear. The status of unknown is because we haven't put any asserts or anything in there, so we don't know what we haven't got anything to actually check yet. So let's insert, let's add a little bit more. Ooh. Let's call it report bugs per developer. Oh, I spelled that right. Not that it matters. Okie dokie. So now I've got a problem with the fact that I'm trying to capture the output of the store procedure into a temporary a test table. I haven't defined that yet. So what I can do is I can create a fixture level procedure which allow me to define the schema once, and that test table can be shared amongst plenty of tests. So that looks like so. Fixture set up, and this is part of the report fixture. Oh, caps like that. Create another procedure. Okay, so we'll define our table. Create table test dot actual. Okay, and we'll need a column to capture our full name in, so let's call that full name. Let's be really original. And there we go. Okay, so we managed to get past that, but of course this procedure doesn't exist, and clearly there's an element of no pun intended, I suppose, I should say there. That should be, there's a schema called pub. And finally, I'll switch to my production code, and let's add our procedure. And to keep Kent Beck happy, we'll do the simplest thing that could possibly work. Like so. Oops, let me just move that down a bit, and then that's not quite so. And, oh, excuse me a second. Okie dokie, so at least it's syntactically correct, but we haven't actually provided any asserts yet. So let's put our first assert in. Excuse me a second. So we need to declare a variable to capture value. Oops. So that, and we can execute that with assert string equal to. Hopefully I can spell my own name right. Hey, okay, first test kind of done. There we go, that's passing. We've got one pass down here. Good stuff. Okay, only problem is, of course, it's a bit of a naive implementation, so we'll need to fix that. So here in Blue Peter tradition, I'm going to cut and paste a couple of bits. I need to actually put some real data in to make my procedure work with something a little bit less trivial. So got a little helper here that allows me to deal with the fact when you're trying to insert into identity tables and you have to turn the identity off and stick a value in and you have to deal with keys. So we have lots of little helpers and stuff. You tend to, just as you would in normal tests, little helpers to help you put a bit of data in. This is an attempt to emulate an enumerated value. So we've got a little bit of data in there now, so I should be able to go back now and replace my somewhat naive implementation with something a little bit more exciting. Okay, so issue.firstName plus issue last name, and now what will happen when I run that in is that will fail, because in this code I actually do have to write the if usual object boilerplate stuff to make sure, because it's production code. So oh, come back. Right, okay, that succeeded. Put that in there. Oh, and lo and behold, as you can see, should have a space between there in my name. Go back, fix my production code. Go back, bing, oh. Okay. So again, this is a problem where I've now got a primary key constraint, and because I'm now inserting data as part of my test, that's now persistent across tests. So I've got to deal with that little bit of transient state. So again, we can use a little helper that basically clears out data. So although the test schema clears out test data, we actually need to clear out our data from our production tables, and that's easily done with another little helper. So there's a bit of kind of ceremony initially to kind of sort of get a trivial test kind of up and running, but eventually that starts to sort of obviously pay off as you spend more time writing less dull code and dealing with actually writing test cases and interesting stuff. So if I put in so that should be a test setup. And I'm going to blatantly cut and paste that. That'll save me typing in. Gosh, I hope that, way, there we go. Right, and we're back to green again. So let me just put that up on the screen so that, okay. So there we go. There's our kind of our first test. Turns our developer's full name. Okay, our basic kind of bit of logic sort of tested. So let's move on to the next one, which is a little bit more interesting, but not a lot. So what we'll do now is we want to return the actual bug count. So you've got the name of the person in as a sort of a display name or slightly nicer name. So let's write another test. And we'll call this one returns bug count per developer. Let's go, and again that'll be in an unknown state. I'm going to be a little bit gratuitous and do a little bit of cutting and pasting because it's kind of similar, but we'll get to something slightly less. This time though, bug count. Who? No, it matters. Okay, we'll call it bug count in our table for want of something original, and this time we're going to compare an integer value, assuming I can spell integer, My setup data says I have one person, one bug, so we'll put a nice one in there, correct that to bug count. Okay, so bug count does not exist in our table, so let's just put that, whoops, put that in here. Like so, and okay, now our production code no longer returns that shape result set. Switch to our code, and again, we'll keep Mr. Beck happy and return a hard-coded value. And yeah, we're back to green again. Okay, we've got that duplication, can't really return hard-coded values. Customer gets a bit upset about that. So we're going to do something just a little bit more clever. Now, at this point, so there's two ways I could tackle this particular thing. I could use a correlated subquery, or I could do it using a manual join and a group by. So I'm going to do it one way, nicely for exposition purposes, and then we'll kind of come back to the other one. So what I can do, from dot bug b, where b dot assign user issue dot user ID, and oh, okie dokie. So there we go. Now implemented it, removed the duplication, and we're good. Now, sorry, just to put that on the screen. So one of the things we all know about working with SQL and databases is there's a lot of voodoo and a lot of black magic, and a lot of time queries just do the wrong thing for no reason. So sometimes we have to change the way a query is written just to get the query analyzer to return us the plan that we wanted it to return in the first place, but it's too stupid to do. So we might have to refactor this query, but obviously we'll have a nice set of tests in place. So I'm going to rewrite this query, not touch the tests, and hopefully we'll get the same behavior, but in a slightly different way. And it makes for a good story a bit later, so we'll see. So what I can do is, instead of doing this correlated subquery, I can turn it into a join, which is all SQL Server will actually do anyway. Under the covers. Okay. Oh, they come back. Okay. Oh, it'd help if I put the group by in. Apologies. Oh, sorry. Wrong key. Oh. Let's try that again. Okay, yep. Let's go back and run our tests again. Oh, hold on, what have I done here? Oh, sorry, a bit of a typo going on. Right, let's try that again. There we go. So in the bigger talk, this would be like, hey, look, we refactored our code and we had tests to back us up. And isn't that really cool? But you already know that you write tests and refactor them. So it's not as impressive to you lot. But okay, so everything's kind of good. We've got a couple of tests, we've got some nice features, and then a boss or somebody in our testing team, Matt for instance, will come along and tell us that, oh, by the way, I'm only getting reports for developers that have bugs assigned to them when we don't have those developers that don't have the bugs assigned to them. That's a bit weird. So let's see if we can write a test and explore that and see whether we can come up with reproduce it. So let's have a new test that says returns bug count even, oh, let's try that again, even when no bugs are assigned. Okay, so I'm going to take a copy of this one. So this time I'm going to delete the bug, so all I have is a user, no bugs assigned. But this time I'm going to do data. SQL is a set-based thing. We don't really like this whole kind of, it's all right for functions, this whole kind of style of a set integer. Really, when you want to do kind of set style comparisons. So we'll do a slightly better way of, what we'll do is we'll do it by comparing two tables, one table with expected data and a table with our actual data. So we can do, we'll create a new table, which is a mirror of our actual table. Let me just expected name, comma, book account, select my name, comma, 0. So the idea is I should be able to sort of encode, make it look a little bit table-y, and I can then do assert table equal to test expected. Test dot actual, and then I'll create my expected table up the top. Remember to clear it in my setup. Now, hopefully, when this test runs, it should fail and tell me that something's awry. And it does. I don't know whether you can see that. I'll give you a little bit more. So what we'll see here is it's told us that this test has indeed failed. There's some difference between these two tables, test and expected, and this is basically the two result sets. And it's right. In our expectations, I was expecting me with a bug count of 0, and there's an entire row missing. Row missing. Hopefully that should, anybody who's done SQL will probably realise that I've done an inner join instead of a left outer join. Of course I have. It's on the tip of your tongue. So I'll run that again, thinking I fixed it. Oh, hold on a second. I've got my extra row. Value's 1. What's going on? Okay, and if I go back, I've got an aggregation. But count star includes rows with nulls in, and that's not right, is it? So it should be something where the row is not null. I'll fix that. Lo and behold, I fixed the bug, and I'm going to go down the pub. Done. That's it.